Georgia Williams was born on the 17th of September 1995 in the Shropshire town of Telford, England. Georgia had been born into a small but close-knit family. She had an older sister named Scarlett and was raised by their parents, Lynette, and their police detective father, Steve. Georgia loved helping people and cared deeply for others, often going out of her way to make sure that those around her were happy and felt included, a beautiful trait that would sadly work to her disadvantage. In her early years at primary school, Georgia had been bullied, but once she began high school, that completely changed. She made many friends, was popular and well-liked, even becoming head girl of the school. She began training as an air cadet whilst in high school and had dreams of becoming an RAF paramedic. When she turned 17, she got her first job at a petrol station in town and made friends very easily with her co-workers. But there was one man in particular at the store who seemed very awkward and shy and seemed to be left out. Georgia felt sorry for him and, due to her sweet nature, had decided to go out of her way to befriend him. Soon enough, he started participating in the group activities with their co-workers. This man would later become known as 22-year-old Jamie Reynolds. Soon enough, Jamie began to develop feelings for Georgia. After all, she had been the only one to show him kindness and took the time to see who he had the potential to be. Surely she must share the same feelings, or so he thought. Jamie soon worked up the courage to express to Georgia that he liked her and wanted to take her out on a date, even stating that he would potentially like to be her boyfriend. Georgia was very considerate of his feelings and turned him down in the most polite way, explaining to him that she wasn't looking for a boyfriend and didn't want to ruin their friendship. Jamie was upset that she didn't feel the same way as him, but seemed to have respected her wishes and moved past it to stay good friends. Deep down inside of him, however, an extremely unhealthy obsession and a dark and twisted fantasy had begun. One day, whilst working a shift together at the petrol station, Jamie had confided in Georgia that he was unhappy with his life and no longer wanted to work at the petrol station. He was getting older and wanted to pursue his passion, one that he could potentially turn into a career. Wanting to support Jamie in any way that she could, Georgia sat down with him and discussed what his hobbies and interests were. Jamie told her that he was really into photography, so Georgia encouraged him to try taking that up as a career instead. Jamie liked this idea and asked Georgia if she could help him to create a professional portfolio by being his first model. Not wanting to let her friend down, Georgia agreed, and the pair booked the photo shoot for Sunday the 26th of March 2013. The plan was for Georgia and a few of their mutual friends to go over to Jamie's parents' house and have a photo shoot. As Sunday soon rolled around, Georgia almost cancelled at the last minute since her family were having a barbecue and her grandparents, who she had not seen for a while, were going to be there. Reluctantly, Georgia eventually decided that she would not disappoint her friend who had been relying on her, and told her family that since she only lived 5 minutes from Jamie's home, she would simply pop round, take a few photographs, and get back to her family. In this way, she would not be letting either party down. That day, Georgia quickly got ready. She did her hair and makeup, put on jeans and a leather jacket, and took off. The last words that her father would ever say to her was that she looked beautiful and reminded him of Sandy from the movie Grease. Georgia left her home at 7:30 p.m. and her family were expecting her back relatively soon, but 3 hours later, she had still not returned home. At first, her mother didn't think anything of it and assumed that she was enjoying herself and lost track of the time. She sent a text message asking when the photo shoot would be over. She then got a text back from her daughter stating that the photo shoot ended a while ago, but that she had been hanging out with friends and probably wouldn't be home until late. Her mother at this time was not suspicious, as her text ended in 3 kissy face emojis like they normally did. and Georgia wasn't the type of girl to get into trouble. Later that night, Georgia's parents went to bed, and when they woke up the next morning, they were alarmed to find that Georgia still wasn't home. Her mother texted her again at around 6:30 a.m, asking where she had been and when she would be home. A response did not come until over an hour later, when she was told by Georgia that she had stayed over at a friend's house and her phone battery was dying, so if she didn't send another text after this, that would be why. What Georgia's mother didn't know was that these texts were not being sent by her daughter. It was now May 27th, and Georgia's parents knew that she had a music festival to go to that day, so when she didn't return home all day, they assumed that she had gone straight to the festival from her friend's house. They did at least expect her to be home by the following morning, as she had her first driving lesson scheduled for that day, and they knew she had been excited about learning how to drive. That night, her parents waited up for her very late, but she was still not home. As panic was now starting to set in, they called up relatives and her friends, but no one had seen or spoken to her in days. When Georgia didn't return home by the following morning for her driving lesson, she was reported missing to the police. Her parents tried to give as much information to the police as they could, but all they really knew was that she was attending a photo shoot at Jamie Reynolds' home, and they had no idea where she was or who she was with after that. The police did the only thing that they could do at that time and looked into Jamie Reynolds, and what they found out about him was quite disturbing. In 2008, Jamie had been caught by the police attempting to strangle a teenage girl. However, no arrest was made and he wasn't charged with any crime. The police merely gave him a warning and sent him on his way. Once they found this on Jamie's record, the police went straight to his house to question him. He had just become the #1 suspect in the disappearance of Georgia Williams. They knocked on the front door of his home, but received no answer, so had no choice but to kick the door in. They looked around the house, but there was no sign of anyone. The manhunt for Jamie had just begun. They first checked the petrol station, but none of their co-workers had seen or heard from either of them. Both had missed their shifts, which was very out of the ordinary. Jamie's parents were also contacted, but they were on holiday at the time. They did, however, manage to give the police the registration of the van that their son drove. The police in Shropshire notified police all over the UK to be on the lookout for the van. Soon enough, Jamie was located in Glasgow, Scotland, 208 miles from where he lived. He had left the country, which was a big red flag. On May the 30th, the Glasgow police arrested Jamie Reynolds at a budget hotel on suspicion of kidnap and took him in immediately for questioning. When they asked him where Georgia was, he told them that he didn't know, and he was transported back to Shropshire. As he was being transported back for questioning, Georgia's loved ones were told that the outcome was not looking good. This, of course, devastated her entire family. Now that they had their prime suspect in custody, the police were able to conduct a thorough search of his home. During this search, they found a camera with an SD card inside, but all of the files had recently been deleted. The camera was taken back to the police station, and experts began work to recover the files once again. When the files were recovered, the grisly findings would bring a tragic end to the investigation. Detectives discovered a number of images that had been taken of Georgia that day. The first couple of photos were normal photographs of Georgia when she first started the photo shoot. This confirmed that the teen had in fact been with Jamie at his house that day. Georgia appeared happy, compliant, and fully clothed, although it was clear that she could never have known Jamie's real intent until it was too late. As law enforcement continued to flick through the photographs, they began to get progressively more dark and disturbing. The next few images showed a distressed Georgia, naked, standing on top of a red recycling box, hands seemingly bound behind her back, with a rope hanging above her neck. After kicking the box away, Jamie filmed Georgia's final moments as she struggled for breath. Once she was deceased, he had sexual intercourse with her corpse in various rooms inside of his home, including on his parents' bed, all the while taking photographs. Jamie then took hundreds of photographs of Georgia in all types of positions. He also removed her jewellery and kept this as a trophy. The police continued to search his home and eventually found nearly 17,000 photos and 72 videos of extremely violent porn, rape videos, snuff films, and people being tortured and murdered. He later even admitted that he was turned on by strangulation. Jamie's parents came home early from their holiday so that they could speak with the police, and they told them that their son had been watching these kinds of extremely violent pornography since he was 14 years old. It could be possible that he was watching it even earlier than that, but that's when they caught him. Since they couldn't take away his laptop due to needing it for school, they contacted their internet provider and had them block his access to all of these websites. However, Jamie later called up the internet provider himself and paid for his own private Wi-Fi so his parents wouldn't know that he was continuing to access these websites. When his parents first caught him watching these videos, they'd become concerned and notified the police and CPS, but were told that nothing could be done, as watching those kinds of videos wasn't illegal. During the rest of the search, the police found notepads that had 40 different stories written by Jamie, all about torturing, raping, and murdering women. He had also trawled social media, printing off pictures of young girls before drawing nooses around their necks. There was also one story written about Georgia called Georgia Williams in Surprise. This story was exactly what had happened to Georgia, and police believed that this story was a plan from the beginning. He began writing it in January and finished it just 3 weeks before the murder had taken place. Whilst in custody, Jamie refused to tell the police anything about where he had put Georgia's body, and was adamant that he was innocent. Since he refused to tell them where her body was, they traced Jamie's steps from that Monday morning, the day after he had killed Georgia. They started at the petrol station, where Jamie was caught on CCTV getting petrol. At this point, Georgia's body was in the back of the van. After filling up his car, he drove 60 miles away to go to the cinema, leaving Georgia's body in the van in the car park before going inside to watch a film. In a twisted sense, this was his way of finally getting to take Georgia on a date as he had wanted. Unfortunately, the police lost track of Jamie after he left the cinema, and a public statement was put out for anyone to come forward if they had sighted his van anywhere else that day. Thankfully this worked, and people came forward with information that they had seen a man in that van on the Nantwigarth mountain pass located near Wrexham. This area was loaded with woods and was extremely muddy. People remembered Jamie in his van, as his van had at one point got stuck in the mud and passers-by had assisted him in getting it out. After hearing this tip, police headed out to the woods where Jamie had been sighted, and it was here that they would sadly find Georgia's naked body. She was soon recovered and transported back to Shropshire. A post-mortem showed that Georgia had died of asphyxia as a result of pressure being applied to her neck, more than likely caused by the ligature. Further examination also found bruising to her back, indicating that Jamie had levered the helpless teenager using his knee to apply further downwards pressure. Meanwhile, Jamie was still maintaining his innocence and insisting that he had nothing to do with Georgia's murder. However, on the first day of the trial in December of 2013, something changed in his mind, and he decided to stand up and plead guilty to everything that he was charged for. Georgia's father told the court that he and Georgia's mother would carry the scars of the memory of seeing his daughter's body as it lay in the hospital's chapel of rest, from here to eternity. During the trial, it also emerged that Jamie had come into the police's attention again in 2008, when he received what the judge had called a final warning, after trapping a 17-year-old girl inside his home in what was a chilling precursor to Georgia's murder. In 2011, he was again reported, this time after reversing his car into that of a girl who had spurned his amorous advances. The case was closed and the judge called Jamie a sexual deviant, stating that he had the potential to become a dangerous serial killer. He was therefore sentenced to a whole life term, meaning that he will never be allowed to leave prison. He was the 46th person to land a whole life term and the youngest in history. The judge, Mr. Justice Wilkie, said, "Georgia would not have died instantly, but would have suffered horribly, both mentally and physically, knowing that she had been betrayed by someone who she had trusted and into whose power she had given herself." Killing Georgia was an expression of a long-standing, recurrent preoccupation with violent, sadistic pornography. You enjoyed the spectacle of her final ghastly minutes as she struggled for life, knowing that she was facing death. Jamie Reynolds hung his head as Georgia's parents and sister listened to all the details on how she was lured to her death and what had happened to her whilst in his possession. When the gruesome images of Georgia's final moments were shown to the jury, her family had to leave the courtroom. In 2014, Jamie Reynolds appealed his whole life sentence. Luckily, he lost. In 2015, a serious case review was critical of police officers, children's services staff and mental health workers over their dealings with Jamie Reynolds. The review stated that agencies had failed to work together when Jamie Reynolds had come to their notice, 5 years before the killing, when he attempted to strangle another girl and invited another over to his house. Georgia's parents stated that they cried after reading about the serious case review and said, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read the report and the failings of all agencies involved, because it was so obvious that Reynolds was, if not one already, a murderer in the making. Georgia's death could have been prevented." Outside of the court, Mr. Williams said, "There is no sentence that we can ever say we're satisfied with, because it will never bring Georgia back. She's dead. She's gone physically and lives on in our hearts." He added that whatever the length of the prison term, Jamie Reynolds still had one thing that he denied his teenage daughter: life. The one thing that will always get to us and cause us grief is the fact that even though Jamie Reynolds is serving a full life sentence, he still has his life to hang on to. Georgia's mother, Lynette, has since chronicled their loss in her book, titled Our Georgia. It reveals their sense of betrayal at the failures that left snuff movie-obsessed Reynolds free to kill. Jamie Reynolds still remains in prison to this day,